Bueno, buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be here today. I'm Eduardo Mangarelli. I represent Microsoft. I'm Director of Technology for Microsoft Latin America. As I saw you coming into the room, I felt how lucky I am. I've been here several times with you. And if I were to compare this, I feel much better today. I had a cast last year. I had a problem. I broke one bone. But the more I am here, the more the pressure, in the sense I feel more and more responsible for dealing with time and having something for you in return. So thank you for being here. And as we try to satisfy your expectations year after year, every time I have an important conference, the way I proceed is 3 weeks before I start with a presentation mode. Whatever I'm doing, I start planning, elaborating on my presentation, going beyond the title. Well, you can have one title and then do whatever else you want to do. So generally what I do is 3 weeks before I start compiling contents. And the graph may change a little bit, but 2 days before I tend to change many things. All I had prepared is reorganized or re-questioned. This is going to be interesting. This is more valuable. What would be better for the expectations of those attending? Over the last 3 weeks, I did many things. I went to Colombia, to Brazil. So I decided to share where Microsoft is located today and where we are moving to. I'm responsible for innovation and new technologies. So I will talk about it from the viewpoint of what I saw in the last 3 weeks. In the last 3 weeks, I've been looking at different things, and I decided on this conference mode to bring something back to you. To start with, 3 weeks ago, we announced that Windows 10 had hit its 75 million mark with 2 million downloads in the business sector. And about a year ago, precisely, when I was with my cast, we announced worldwide that the following Windows version was going to be launched, and that we were opening a program which was Windows Insiders, which allowed developers or professionals to access the new Windows release at an early stage. Over 5 million professionals in technology tried Windows in the early stages under that program, Windows Insider, and in fact they still do so. Because one of the aspects we changed in Windows as operating system is that Windows 10 is the last Windows version. Windows as a service is what we have now. Windows is constantly modifying and providing new applets that not only deal with bugs or things to improve, but there are new functionalities. So, as from July 29 until this date, there were 3 intermediate releases that users receive, and are not just fixes, but there are improvements in the user interface, support of drivers, improvements in multiple device experience. And as part of the vision of Windows 10 and as part of its implementation, the core of the OS, which you need to understand from a technological point of view, its core went to N platforms. It's the same core of the OS running in my tablet, Intel tablet, or my PC, or run in a telephone. So the Windows 10 mobile version is the same core of the OS that runs in the PC or the tablet. And that is very relevant because it not only speaks about the capacity, thinking of the user's experience, but also the experience of the applications. And that is why we have defined the Universal Windows Platform, which means that one same application may run in multiple devices of the Windows 10 family, not just the desktop or the tablet, but also devices such as the over 80 inches, which interact in the modality of meetings or collaborative work, or in devices like IoT, the Internet of Things, in the case of the Raspberry Pi 2, and one presentation will talk about this in detail, or devices like the HoloLens, the lens of increased reality, enhanced reality, that allow us to interact with holograms and with the reality of what I see at that time. Many of you saw videos. If you haven't, please look them up and try to understand what this HoloLens is all about. But it's the same core for the OS, the same platform running in all the devices, and the same application runs in each of these devices. In fact, there is one example which is very characteristic with Office in particular, and the Office mobile version that we have announced, and I think it's available for Windows 10 mobile devices. With Windows 10 Mobile, we announced a concept called Continuum. Together with the chipset, the new one from Qualcomm, the telephone, through an adapter, may connect to a TV set or a screen, and then to a Bluetooth keyboard and a Bluetooth mouse, and the telephone works as a PC. In the case of Office, you would have the same experience you have in a tablet running on the telephone, but with a TV set or a screen with a mouse and the keyboard. This looks for a special experience so that you may take mobile world applications and use the telephone as a PC or as a tablet, pointing to mobility. Wherever you are, you can connect your telephone to a larger screen or a Bluetooth keyboard, and in this way you can have an experience, a working experience that is integrated. Now, talking about what happened over these 3 weeks, a very interesting thing. 3 weeks ago, and I'm sure many of you remember this, Microsoft was present in the Apple event where they announced the new iPhone version and iPad Pro, and Microsoft was there announcing together with Apple the new version of Office for iPad Pro in particular, responding to those characteristics of iPad Pro that have to do with multitasking. I think this was iconic because Microsoft was part of the most important event of Apple that year, presenting Office. And the press talks and the mass media talk about the new Microsoft, the new approach of Microsoft. And I think there are good examples of this in the new approach that has to do with the fact that we are newly oriented in the company. And these are some of the examples of companies with whom we have signed agreements in the last 12 months. With Apple, we have agreements to promote Office. With Rackspace, we implement cloud computing services, agreements with Oracle. Oracle providing databases supported by Premium as part of our cloud computing platform. Agreement with Docker. Docker is one of the most interesting trends today in terms of architecture, the scenario of containers. They play a very important role in the cloud scenario. We have an agreement with Docker, and we participated in the Docker's keynote conference, announcing that we no longer only support Docker in the cloud, in our cloud, but also within the Windows itself, we support the containers architecture. This, as we are part of the Open Container Alliance, together with Google, IBM, Docker, to generate a standard platform to support containers. the agreement with SAP, so that SAP solutions that are certified run on Azure, and with Salesforce, where in several areas we are competitors, but we also found an area for collaboration. And with Salesforce, we announced the support for rich Salesforce customers within the platform. And last week, we announced what the press called iPhone Pro. This is an iPhone with all the applications available of Microsoft for the iOS platform. And we could see an analogy of this for Android. Our approach is that when we think on mobility and mobility of users, we think that the same tools and the same capabilities have to be available regardless of the device that we choose to use. So, in this case, with the iPhone, I may find not only the office tools, I can find other tools of collaboration like Delph, or I can find the remote desktop or the authentication tool, or I may find the application to synchronize Microsoft Bank. So when we think of applications and the user in his personal role or in his professional activity, we think of applications and capacities regardless of the platform he's using. Following what happened this week, I have a video, and I went to Colombia to meet with part of my regional team. And part of the regional team, in particular 2 people from Brazil, prepared this thing that I want to share with you. Buenos días, señor Tyler.
Bueno, como verán, además de contratar.
Well, apart from hiring technical specialists, we hire producers. These two persons from our Brazilian team, they use a Raspberry Pi device running Windows 10 for IoT. They programmed an app that connects to Wi-Fi and a cloud service, and on that basis, from different devices, he could call the elevator to get to his floor. I'm cutting the story short. But this allows you. You can do this with your Microsoft telephone or your PC. You call the elevator and then you get this notification when the elevator is getting to your floor. This is a type of capacity that we look for when we think about the same platform for n number of devices. If we think of an intelligent cloud, we are using notification services of the cloud to notify when the elevator arrives. If we think about notification services in the cloud, and last week I had a meeting with one of the main producers of content in Brazil, they are Amazon customers and they have an important part of their platform in Amazon. And they use Azure in particular in cloud computing because of the notification system, because it is thought to deal n number of devices. And it's, if we are more technical, it is very easy to integrate notifications in iOS or Android or in Windows Phone, which is another example of how, when we conceptualize or when we put a technology available, we think of a multiplicity of platforms and we deal with them. Last week, we announced, when I was in Brazil, that the Olympic Games in Rio 2016, all the online infrastructure will be supported by Windows Azure. And this implies that we will see more than 12 billion page views, 60% of access will be from mobile devices, and we estimate that the service during a period of a month will have the more consumption of resources in history. Today, we are working with the Olympic Group, and we have agreed that 100% of the infrastructure will run on Azure. This has a lot to do with the footprint, that is the distributed capacity in terms of data centers worldwide. But not just that, how we conceptualized Azure in terms of services and capacity. Today, we can say Microsoft Azure, is it a technology? Well, we have over 50 different services and capacities. Some of them we may know or expect as more standard, like infrastructure as a service, having virtual machines. And if we think of virtual machines, we think of the Windows world or the Linux world. Today, 25% of virtual machines in infrastructure as a service modality on Azure are Linux OS, 25%. And one of the characteristics that I find more interesting to exploit today as mobile services to take advantage of the capacity to connect to the cloud. But I think that one of the most disruptive and cutting across scenarios today is that of machine learning. As part of Azure, we have one of these components, Azure Machine Learning. In Brazil, last week, I met Dieta e Saúde, a company in Brazil that offers personalized diet services. They have several rules and users that subscribe. On the basis of the rules, they receive recommendations. All their intelligence went to the scenario of machine learning, and on the basis of large volumes of data, they trained algorithms so that recommendations for dietary orientations were personalized on the basis of people, the season, where the person lives, geographic localization, and they increased 70% user engagement, and they improved 120% the weight lost in 1 year per individual. And this is an example. This is one of the most fascinating areas. Any technological solution we may think of today will provide a machine learning scenario to apply, to generate intelligence, to learn from the behavior of users, to get patterns. I think this is one of the most interesting areas today. And in connection to that, the way in which we conceptualize this Azure machine learning is that we don't need to have data science super experts. So we can have developers or architects with some knowledge in machine learning management to choose, to try the most appropriate algorithms, depending on the results we are seeking and using. I think it's the concept of democratizing machine learning is important, to go beyond the border of super experts or the R language or the super experts in data science and so on. Now, last week also, we announced a new version of Office, Office 2016. And I'm not going to go into details of the characteristics, but there are three important factors. The first, this is a transition from a new version of Office. We are becoming more transparent to users. It's the most transparent ever. Why? Because the most common way of using Office today is via subscriptions. And therefore, the user that has a subscription has a transparent update. Only an upgrade, both in the application installed, if he's using desk installations, the mobile, or the web version. All Office services today, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, are available in the web modality. So the upgrade is, when we release the next version, the upgrade is available. This is a very interesting phenomenon. This changes the paradigm of how users acquire Office. I think Netflix has been the disruptor in terms of generating a different habit in users to buy online subscriptions. I think we owe a lot to Netflix from the point of view of how users buy subscriptions of Office online, and they pay less than when paying a Netflix subscription. We have to break this change of paradigm, and more users of Office today do it as a service. The first characteristic. Now the second, the fact that from the time zero, it is available for all platforms. That means Windows, iOS, Android, Mac, it is available for all. And the third characteristic that is very relevant for all of us is Office as a platform. Having within Office APIs that allow us to develop services on that. In Brazil last week, the taxing service for sworn statements includes or develops DIM in JavaScript to interact with APIs of Office, and that runs in all the platforms. The same add-in for Office Web, the same add-in in Office for Windows and Office for iOS. So conceptualizing Office as a set of capacities that can be used as platform and consumed by users. I mean developers, not users. Last week, as I was in Brazil, we had an event, the most important event that year, Microsoft Tech Day. And I want to share a video and connect it to something we announced last week.
Hi, can you guess where I live? ¿Te encuentras en América del Norte?
You in North America?
Do you live in central Mexico?
¿Tú dónde vives en México? Are you in the US? Sí. ¿Y tú dónde estás? Are you close to Seattle? Sí, muy cerca de Seattle. ¿Estás en la Ciudad de México? Yes, I am. Are you in Tacoma? Sí. Adivinaste bien. Thank you. ¿Te gusta vivir?
Do for fun.
¿Qué haces para divertirte?
Voy a las playas de México.
I'm going to the beaches of Mexico.
I like to swim.
Me gusta nadar.
A mí también.
Me too.
Where in the world do you wish to travel?
¿A dónde en el mundo te gustaría viajar?
A Rusia.
To Russia.
¿Y tú?
And you?
Everywhere. Sería increíble algún día verte en México.
It would be amazing to see you someday in Mexico.
I would really like to visit you sometime.
Me gustaría mucho visitarte algún día.
A mí también.
Me too.
La semana pasada, en el contexto
Last week, in the context of Microsoft TK, we announced Skype Translator with support in Portuguese. We showed it for the first time. Rico Magbar is one of the directors of Microsoft Research. He's Brazilian. And he shared this video. I don't like to share videos where people may say, well, that's a video, it doesn't work in reality. I invite you to try it. Try Skype Real-Time Translator and try this experience. It has support in 8 languages. The intelligence behind this has to do with machine learning to interpret voice, to translate. Translation is not just literal. It has to do with the context where the conversation comes from. I think this is one of the technologies when we think about the impact this may have. This is tremendous. And as I was telling you last week, this is available in Spanish, in English, and in 6 other languages. Last week we announced that very shortly we'll make this support available in Portuguese. But also last week during this event, there was a kind of something iconic. The person up there on the left is Bruno Brunsel, leader and president of the open source community in Brazil. We've been working with them for about a year and a half to generate links to support our technology and the open source scenario and Linux. I mentioned several times supporting Azure for Linux, but we made specific reference to how Java today, PHP, Python, Node.js are technologies on which I can run my applications in Azure. The .NET Core is open source today, and it's not just open source, but it also we also provide support for the Mac and Linux. So this has to do clearly with a reapproach, trying to understand the technological scenario and our openness to support different types of scenarios. As we conceptualize all this, we think of the cloud, the mobile devices, productivity, and we conceptualize this in 3 large scenarios, and this is how we organize our approach to the market. On the one hand, to provide cloud capacity and cloud intelligence, or reinvent productivity, going beyond the barriers of tools and thinking about collaboration, integration of multiple platforms and devices, and transparent integration, how an individual can work with several devices and several platforms on the same day. And finally, to create more personal computing on the basis of intelligence, cloud intelligence, or the capacity of mobile devices. Having said so, I invite you, and I hope that I really hope that you have the curiosity to find out and try these new things. Thank you very much. If there are questions, I will be available.